Okay, this is college goal training for the 16-17 FAFSA year cycle, and we're recording this so that other people who can't come to the training in person can watch this. And so we're going to go over the FAFSA for the 16-17 year, and that I'm using screenshots for that because I had problems in the past using a real FAFSA, it'll time out. And then we'll just talk briefly about the DREAM Act application in Minnesota for undocumented students, because they'll be using that instead of the FAFSA to apply for state financial aid. Then we'll have a short break, and Pam will do training for site coordinators on what you need to do to have an event on your campus. That's the FAFSA site, FAFSA.gov. It's now up and operational for the coming 16-17 year. We usually like students to apply as early as they can, particularly because there are some financial aid programs that have deadlines that are earlier. And then we do have the few campuses in Minnesota that use the CSS profile form in addition to the FAFSA. And that's available, started to be available last fall, and that is a much longer application that's used for colleges to award their own financial aid. There's the FAFSA site, FAFSA.gov, and students can do everything on this site. When you're helping a student first do their first FAFSA, they will start a new FAFSA. Otherwise, if they've already done that, they can just log in and make a correction or anything like that. So it's all at that one page. I just was really happy to find out we don't have to worry about FAFSA.com anymore. That was the commercial site that a company bought up, that URL. A lot of people would go to that and start filling out the FAFSA and not realize there's a fee for their service. So now they, if a student logs into that, they'll be directed to the free FAFSA site, the government official FAFSA site. These are the browsers supported for FAFSA on the web, and sometimes students have problems, particularly from their iPhones or handheld devices. So it's best to do it on a regular PC if you can do that. But you'll want to make sure people have that kind of browser in order to do it. One of the things coming up on the FAFSA is school codes that a student lists. So if there's up to 10 spots where you can list colleges to have your output from the FAFSA sent to. And it used to be that students would list them in the order of how likely it would be that they're going to go to that college, and that's still true. But now when the colleges get the output, they will not see other colleges. They will only just get the ICER for their own school, and they won't know what spot they were listed on the FAFSA. And that was because some of the schools were actually looking at that ranking, thinking if our school's in the 10th spot, that student may not be serious about coming here. And so now they're going to fix that so colleges won't see the other codes on there. That for state agencies like our agencies, we'll still get all the codes in the order. But the following year, they don't want to even do that for state agencies. And this will only present a problem in other states that might award their state financial aid centrally out of the higher ed agency. They won't know which was the first college choice. But here in Minnesota, most everything is decentralized. So colleges, if you get the ICER at your campus, you can award state financial aid using that. So shouldn't be a problem in Minnesota. The thing that trips up a lot of people is the FAFSA or FSA ID, which replaced the PIN last year. And when you go to create a FSA ID, which is a username and a password, you'll need to create a username and password and then also have 5 challenge questions. And so it's more secure than having a PIN number, and that's why they converted to that. But it does end up tripping up a lot of people. And you will need to have an email address to get a FSA ID, which is a problem for some parents if they don't have one or they don't have a computer at home. They're not going to let the parent use the student's email address. So the one parent will have to get a email address. You can get a free one and use that to get a FSA ID. But if they forget the FSA ID, they'll be given a chance to get that by either having it emailed to them or answering some challenge questions right on the screen to get their username or password if they forgot that. But when I go around doing FAFSA events, this is a thing that tends to trip people up, either this FSA ID or the IRS DRT, data retrieval process. So you have information there about how they get their FSA ID. With the FAFSA on the web, IRS data retrieval, that is what colleges really want students to do, to import data from the IRS system into the FAFSA on the web. And there's always sort of a timing issue with that. If you want to do your FAFSA early, oftentimes you haven't done your taxes yet, or you've done them so recently you can't bring them into the FAFSA yet. So I think the most common way people do it is go ahead and do your original FAFSA, either with estimated tax figures, and then when you do figure out your taxes and file, wait a couple weeks and then go in and make a FAFSA correction, bring in the IRS data as a correction, and remember to sign it when you're making that correction with your FSA ID, and then you'll be good to go. Now, the one thing there is if a family files their taxes and they owe money to the IRS and don't pay it at that time, it's unpaid, those returns aren't processed until May or June. So that is going to delay the IRS DRT for those families until they actually get their returns processed later on in May or June. Yeah, it can be done originally or as a correction. If they do forget, if they fill out a FAFSA saying estimated tax information or I will file, and then they don't correct that until after April 15th, they'll get an email from the FAFSA system. You should have done your taxes by now. Go back again and pull in your tax information into the FAFSA, and they can do it mostly as a correction there. And that's all the information that comes in from the tax form, adjusted gross income, taxes, and all of that. Because, when you look at a tax form and you look at the wages on line 7 of a 1040, they're combined wages if both parents work. And so that won't populate the FAFSA because the FAFSA has different fields for parent wages. So that little pop-up screen allows the student or parent to segregate out their wages and manually enter them rather than it coming in from the IRS. It would work if you have a single parent as a tax filer, but not when you have two parents earning. And those are all the people who can't use that IRS process. If you had a change in marital status, like parents were married when they filed the form, but now they're divorced, and the student's only listing one parent on the FAFSA, you don't want to pull in joint income from the IRS. If you have students' parents who are unmarried but living together, they will have filed separate tax forms again, and you can't bring those in. If you do an amended back tax return, that's not going to come in. But for most people, you will be able to use this tool, and it helps the college with verification if the application is selected to be verified. They've got all this kind of information right from the IRS. and they may just have to ask a question about household size or something like that. When you're doing that IRS data retrieval and the screen pops up telling you it's going to the IRS to pull your data, you're having to put in the address where the parents resided, or student if you're doing it for the student, and it's really picky on the match criteria that it's going to match with the IRS. I tried it the first year and it wouldn't work for me. I live on 3rd Street. You know, ST period doesn't match ST without a period, or street. Third doesn't match 3 or the word third. So you have to be really, have your tax form in front of you and type it in exactly. And what I've noticed trips some people up is if they live in an apartment. Up here on the tax form is a box for apartment number that corresponds directly to that IRS DRT screen apartment number. But some tax preparers or families, when they put in their street address, might put apartment right in that field rather than the separate apartment field. And in which case, this would be blank on their tax form and it's not going to match. So do it exactly like it is on the tax form and you shouldn't have a problem. If they can't use that, if they're a family that can't use it, they're selected for verification, they will need to get a paper tax transcript from the IRS. And they stop letting you get it right online and print it. Then you have to either call them at a toll-free number or go to their website and order one, and it will be mailed to the student or parent. And takes 5 to 10 days, and it will be mailed to the address on the tax form. Okay, so if they have since changed their address, there is a form on the IRS site, an official IRS tax transcript form, where you fill that out and tell it can be sent to a third party, where you could have it sent to your current address or right to the college. And that's what you'll have to do if you've had a change in address. Otherwise, it goes right to their address on their tax form. So here we are at the FAFSA screen, and if you're helping a student, if they're a senior, it's probably going to be starting a new FAFSA, unless it doesn't matter which one you pick really. Once you enter the student's information to get into the system, it'll let you know if it found a previous FAFSA. You may have someone who did a FAFSA forecaster practice FAFSA, and as in their junior or senior year, it'll find that. And you can either get into it entering the student's FSA ID if they've perchance had one prior to doing this, if they got their FSA ID already, or just the student's information. You pick one of those. And here you put in the name and the social security number and birth date, and it will get you into the system there. And notice the hints on the right. They're always going to have instructions in that box on the right, which are very good instructions. And then it will let you choose which year you want to go to. This person may have had one for 15, 16, but we're going to go into the 16, 17 FAFSA here. And it tells them you have to fill one out every school year, and you do, one per school year. Then you have the password screen or a save key. This is just temporary password if you want to work a little bit on your FAFSA and save it, come back to it, and then submit it. So let's say they're at a FAFSA college goal event and they know a lot of stuff but need to get a few items from their parents. They can save it, go back to it at home, enter those items, and then submit it. So after it's submitted, you're not really using this password anymore. Then you have the intro page, and if they want to look at those items, how long will it take me to do this? What documents do I need and all of that. And then you'll proceed and you'll get into the demographic info. And let me see if I can, oh, it's not going to go bigger for me. When you're putting in your name, social security number, date of birth, those are kind of critical that they should be correct and match what they have on their social security card, because it's going to go through that match behind the scenes and it will kick out an error that will need to be resolved if they don't match. So make sure they're looking at their social security card. You have gender here, which is just used, I suppose some colleges may use it for other purposes, but within the FAFSA, because it's selected male, I will later have questions about selective service registration, which is a requirement for males 18 to 25. Street address, city, state, zip code. Have you lived in the state for at least 5 years? This says Alabama because it's standard screenshots from the federal government, but for most of the people you're working with, it'll be Minnesota. If they say no, it will open up more questions. Well, how long have you lived in Minnesota and things like that. And then the student's email address, which is where they're going to get their results sent to. They're linked to their student aid report. And if they don't have an email address, it will be accepted, and then they'll get mailed the output document. But I think every student has an email. The student's marital status would be like single, married, divorced, and all of that. Probably for high school students, it's going to be single. And this again, some students get married when they're younger, a cultural marriage, but it's not a legal civil marriage in Minnesota. So this means single, a legal marriage in Minnesota, the same married there. Driver's license information is asked for. It does not cause any problems with processing the FAFSA if they don't have that. Some states or schools may look at that as a factor for state residency, but it doesn't affect the calculation of the EFC. And then you have U.S. citizen question. That'll have 3 options. That will be U.S. citizen, permanent eligible non-citizen, or neither of the above. Okay, so really to get the FAFSA through without problems and qualify for federal aid, you're going to have to be a citizen or what they call eligible non-citizen. And that'll, if you pick eligible non-citizen, it will tell you on the right what that is, but it's someone who's a permanent resident, conditional permanent resident, someone who entered as a refugee to the United States. So it's not undocumented students. They shouldn't be doing the FAFSA. Anyone who says neither of the above will have a FAFSA process but rejected. That will have to later be resolved. Here's the selective service stuff. If you say, no, I'm not registered, you can have the FAFSA system register you. A lot of people tell me it's just easier for the student to say yes and then go register with the selective service system on sss.gov. But the FAFSA system can register the student if they check yes there. And that's if they're 18 to 25. If they're 17 when they're filling it out, they do not have to register yet. It will ask their high school completion status, which normally will be a high school diploma or a GED or homeschooling where they finished high school, or neither of the above. To get federal financial aid, they will have to have that high school credential. Grade level, most of the students at these events would be putting attended college before first year, maybe if they had PSEO courses, college courses while in high school, or never attended college before first year. Schools, colleges really know their grade level on campus, but they'll usually, for the students you're working with, put some kind of first year status. And that's true even, I mean, I would still put first year even if you had a lot of PSEO in high school, because you are an incoming freshman at the school. Their credential is going to ask what type of, certificate, diploma, 2-year degree, bachelor's degree, second bachelor's degree, master's, graduate. You're going to put the first credential they're working for, not their end goal. So if you say a PhD or a master's degree, their output will tell them you're not eligible for Pell Grant because it thinks they're a graduate student. So for most people, it'd be first bachelor's degree or a shorter credential if they're working on that. Work study question, are you interested in work study? I would always say yes, just because some colleges use that to award work study. You can always turn it down if you don't want it. So answer yes to that. Do you have your bachelor's degree before the school year starting? Students you're working with would say no. If they do answer yes, again, that FAFSA output will say you're not eligible for Pell Grant, and you'd have to go back and correct that. It will ask if they're a foster youth, and that's just so they can be identified by the school as maybe someone who may need extra help, and also there's some financial aid available for kids who are in foster care later in life. In Minnesota, it's run through the Department of Human Services, where you get a up to $5,000 voucher to help pay tuition and fees. And then it will ask for education level of parents, and this is the student's biological or adoptive parents. Even if the parents are now divorced and you're only going to be providing income information for one parent, you're still going to answer these about both their parents, their highest level of education. Again, it won't affect financial aid eligibility, but it does help colleges find first-generation college students whose parents haven't been to college, as maybe students who would qualify for TRIO programs or extra help. Have you ever received federal aid in the past? Yes or no? If you're dealing with high school students, that would be a no. If it's answered yes, it just then goes on to ask them, have you had a conviction for the sale or possession of illegal drugs while getting federal aid? If they have, we'll tell them what they need to do. They're not going to be eligible unless certain steps are taken to resolve that issue. But I don't think it comes up a lot with college goal events. Then you go to the high school selection area, and they started having students provide their high school name because they were worried about students and buying diplomas from diploma mills. And so they will have a master list of all high schools in the country, and the student can try to find it by typing in part of the name and the city and state, hitting confirm, and it will look to see in that database where their high school is. They would find it, and then it'll bring in the official spelling and all of that, and then you would move forward to the next item. If the high school, for some reason, and they're only going to see this if they said they had a high school diploma. GED people, homeschool people won't see this. If they don't find the high school in the database, the student still can manually enter the high school name on the FAFSA, and it will go through. Then you get to the college section, and there again is language telling the students now the schools aren't going to see the order in which you list them. And they can either, if they know the federal FAFSA code for the college, they can enter that, or they can look it up. And you could just select Minnesota for the state and search, and it would show every college in Minnesota in alphabetical order. Or you could put in a city as well if you know that part of the school name, and then search for it and select it. And up to 10 colleges there. you can put on the FAFSA. If students later want to add more, they would go in as a correction, but that is going to drop. If you add another one, you're going to have to drop someone off that maybe you're less likely to attend. And adding a school code is a very common correction students make. They decide to go somewhere else. They do need to go in and add that school. And here they picked 3 colleges, and they're going to list those and then ask you for the housing plans for each one. And that would be on campus, off campus, or with parents. And, you know, sometimes that'll change, but it's what their best guess is as of the time they're filling it out. I'm going to just ask a college here. Val, what do you do if they say I'm living on campus and they don't live on campus?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
If it comes in like that, we don't usually do anything. If they report it to us when they come to school, we might change it because the FAFSA says as of today.
Yeah.
It's a snapshot. That's what your best. It's not a required field to update.
In many colleges, it won't make a difference with financial aid. A college will use cost of attendance to figure out the financial aid package, and that includes living costs and so forth. Where you live you could have a different cost of attendance for students with parents, students on their own, students on campus. Some schools have the same cost of attendance for everyone, where this won't make a difference at all. But the school knows if you're living on campus once you do go into a dorm. So this is your best guess at that point. Then you get to the dependency section, and I'm sorry, this is probably a little small for people in back, but you'll go through 13 questions, yes/no questions. And this will determine if someone has to apply as dependent with their parents' information or independent with only their own information. And usually people you're dealing with at a college goal event will be dependent, but not always. And so if they can answer yes to any one of these, they can apply as independent. Otherwise, if they're all no's, they're going to be dependent. And so one way is to be 24 or older by December. In this case, it's, well, they word it a different way. You'd have to be 24 before December 31st of 2016. Yes or no? Are you married? Again, that's a legal civil marriage. Yes or no? If you're married, you can be independent. Are you a master's or doctorate program? Yes or no? Unlikely for someone at a college goal event probably to be in that program. If you have children who will receive more than half of their support from you during the school year. And this is a tricky one. If you have a high school student that has a child, you really have to ask who is it that's supporting that child. If it's a student living at home with her parents, with the baby, and the parents are supporting everyone, you'd have to answer no here. So the key is, are the student's own parents providing more than half of the support for the child? If yes, then you have to answer this no. But if the student is, you can answer that yes. And some colleges may ask for some documentation to kind of prove that, in that it's unusual for someone 17 or 18 to be supporting a child. But they could live, a student could live on their own with like a boyfriend. And the key is whether the student's own parents are providing that support. If not, then the student could answer yes there. Other dependents, that would be someone other than a child the student is providing more than half of the financial support for and will live in the student's household during the school year. This would be very rare for a younger student, but it occasionally may happen. I've maybe seen, so I work with some of the DREAM Act students, and have been cases where it's actually the dependent student who's supporting the parents because they don't have jobs and the student's 20 years old and working full time. But other than that, that would typically be a no. Are you serving on active duty? Yes or no, for purposes other than training. And that would sort of be unusual for someone at a college goal event. Or are you a veteran? Yes or no. Anytime after you turn 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in a foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? So 13 or older, if any of those applies, you can answer yes to that, even if it's not the case now. So if I went into foster care when I was 14, but I'm now back with my parents, I can still answer yes to that, and that allows me to apply as independent. So that's one way someone, a younger student, could be independent. Another one, according to a court in your state of legal residence, are you an emancipated minor? That would be very, very rare in Minnesota. And students who answer yes to that, I bet most colleges were going to ask for documentation to make sure that's true, because it's an error-prone question. They think if they move away into an apartment, they're free, they're emancipated, but it's really a legal proceeding. So would most likely be no. And then legal guardianship, and that's sort of an error-prone question too, but they kind of changed the wording on that. This is someone other than your parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you. So that could be another relative or so forth. And it has to be done by a court. And a lot of students will live informally with the relative, an aunt or uncle, but it's not legal guardian. They can't answer yes to this. But if they do have someone else, they would answer yes and apply as independent. They're never going to be substituting the legal guardian's information for their own parents' information on the FAFSA. And then it will ask them if they're homeless, and then it will go on to ask if they're an unaccompanied youth who is homeless, and that's someone on their own without their parents who has no permanent place of residence. And if that's so, they can apply as independent, answer yes to one of those questions, and apply as independent. And the school may ask for documentation on that, either from the homeless shelter director, from the school's homeless liaison at the high school, so forth. And it could be they never self-identified to anyone as being homeless and the school doesn't know about it. They can still talk with the financial aid office about it, be interviewed by someone in the financial aid office, and that can serve as documentation. So they're not totally out of luck if someone at the school never knew they were homeless. So if you do answer all no's, as we have here on the screen mock-up, it will go through then as a dependent applicant. And then they will see this screen. You answered all no's, you're going to be dependent. And then you will either say, yes, I will provide parent information, or I am unable to provide parents' information. And if they choose the latter one, it says you told us you were unable to provide your parents' information. And then it tells them kind of the situations where you can't just say you're not going to provide parental information if your parents are unwilling to do the FAFSA, or just because you live independently. Has to be for more special circumstances, left the household due to abuse, parental relationships severed, parents can't be located, things like that. Parents are incarcerated. At any rate, if they can't get the parents' information, they still can submit the FAFSA by saying they can't get it, but it's going to be unresolved. The school will get it, but it will be in reject status until the student follows up with the school, explains the situation, and they may be eligible for a dependency override. which allows the college to force through the application as self-supporting. And they're going to need documentation about that parental relationship being severed. Usually they'll ask for it for a couple sources. Might be a high school counselor, a teacher, clergy, someone who knows the family, who will document that. So it's not just for someone who happened to move out when they were 18, get an apartment with a friend. It's very serious cases, and it's going to be based on the discretion of the financial aid office. They can choose to do it or choose not to do it. It's not forced upon them. If they do have the special circumstances like that, they will note that on that screen on the FAFSA, and then the school will know that's someone that they're going to need to follow up with. If it's a student that can't provide parents' information because they're unwilling, so they've said, I can't provide parent information, but it's not an unusual circumstance, then they're told either you provide parents' information or all you may get at the college for financial aid is an unsubsidized Stafford loan. And that's only if your parents will document in writing and sign something saying they won't be providing financial support to you during the year. And so it's even hard to get the unsubsidized loan. So we're going to provide parents information, and it will ask the parents' marital status. So the big thing on the FAFSA is which parents' information do you provide if they're divorced, separated, and so forth. So if they're divorced, it's going to ask the student, and they'll see in the instruction, if they're divorced, the student's going to pick the parent they live with the most in the last year. Okay, it's typically the custodial parent. If the student lived with both parents the exact equal amount of time, then it reverts to which parent provided the most financial support in the last year. And you might see some cases like that where maybe parents are divorced but still living together in the same house with the student until they sell the house or something. But usually it's the one they live with the most in the last year. And then if that parent remarries, you're also including step-parents' information, which is a requirement, even if they never adopted the child. So if mom and dad are divorced and I'm going to use mom's information and she remarried, I'm going to say married or remarried for my response because I'm going to be providing information for both of them. But if my mom didn't remarry, I will say divorced or separated then, and it will just bring up fields to fill out information for one parent instead of two. And they did add a response there for unmarried and living together. And that came about a few years ago, where if your biological adoptive parents never married and you're living with them, they're living together, you check that response, and for all intents and purposes, you're sort of treated as married in the formula. It'll look at both of your incomes. It'll ask when your parents got married, which no student ever knows. Do your best guess. I wouldn't know. I don't know when my parents got married. That's more to let the college know if it was a recent change. And they might have to make some adjustments to income or something. Then it will ask for each parent's social security number. And remember here that some students are documented where the student's a citizen but their parents are not. And that's okay. The parents would then put in all zeros for social security number if they don't have one. And then they will put in the last name, middle initial, parent's birth date. For up to 2 parents, if they're married, they'll put information for mom or dad. While I think of it, if it is someone who does not have a social security number, that parent is not going to be able to get an FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA. You need a social security number for that. So at the end, they're going to have to print out a signature page, physically sign it, and mail it in. Then it will ask for parents' email address, and if they don't have one, it won't prevent the FAFSA from being filed, but again, you need an email address to get that FSA ID. And then parents' state of residence, just like the students. And then household size, and that's kind of a critical field for financial aid eligibility in determining the expected family contribution. And if you click on that, it will bring up a little worksheet like this to help the student figure out. Sorry, I can't make this larger for you to see this, but it will always include the parents that you're reporting on the FAFSA. So if parents are married, at least 2 parents, or unmarried, living together, 2 parents. Otherwise, if it's divorced, it's going to be 1 parent. And then the student, always the student, even if they don't live with the parents. And then any siblings, any other children that the parents are providing more than half of the financial support for. They don't have to be living with the parents. And the other thing with siblings is even if parents aren't financially supporting them, but they're young enough to have to apply for financial aid as dependent, they're 22 in an apartment on their own, parents don't support them, but they're single, no kids, they'd have to apply for financial aid as dependent, then you can include that person in the household size there. And then any other people that will live in the parent's household during the school year and receive more than half of their financial support. That could be extended family members, who may be living there, but parents do have to provide more than half of their support. So if grandma's there, but grandma's getting a lot from Social Security and a pension, she's probably not getting half her support from the parents. So that's who goes into the household size. And if mom is expecting a child that will be born during the school year, or before, she can include that in the household size as well. Same with the student. If the student's expecting a child that'll be born and the student's own parents will be supporting both of them, that child can be included in the household size. So that is something that most colleges will verify if it's selected for verification, but it can really make a big difference in the EFC if you forget to include someone who should be included. And then out of that household size, it'll ask how many are in college the coming school year, and that should not be parents. That would typically be siblings or other people in the household who are enrolled half-time or more at a college that's eligible for federal financial aid. If you run across a case where there is a parent in college, you might approach tell the student to talk to the financial aid office about it. They can use professional judgment, their own discretion, to allow a parent to be listed in the number in college. Usually it's done for parents who may have been laid off and are going back to college full-time and have real substantial college costs. Probably not done for a parent taking 1 college class at night who's working. And so be sure to follow up on that. Then it will go ask for parents' income information and have you done your taxes, already completed, will complete, not going to file. 3 possible responses. If you say not filing, if they earn so little they don't have to file, then it's not going to ask for a lot of the tax form items. But will file or already completed will pop up the tax items. There again, what was your tax filing status? Married, filed a joint return is probably most common for married parents. For a single parent, you might have head of household, something like that. That is going to have to match. That's going to be important for that IRS data retrieval process to pull in that information. It's going to have to match what's on the tax form. It will then go through some questions to see if that parent might be able to bring in their data from the IRS. It's asking, did you amend your form? No. Did you file a foreign return? No. Did you file your form within the last 3 weeks? No. Then it says, okay, you might be able to bring it in. And then it will ask, which parent are you? And you'll pick one of the parents, and then put in the parent's FSA ID. And if they don't have one, they will have to go pop out for a minute and create that FSA ID and enter it there. And then you can start doing that data retrieval. But if you answer yes, I just filed it a week ago, so you're answering yes here. It's not going to bring all this IRS DRT stuff in. You'll have to manually enter tax figures on the FAFSA, just like the old days. So it'll bring that up. If you do go do it, it'll say it's leaving the FAFSA to go to the IRS site, and you'll hit OK. And then it will tell you this is the official IRS site. You better be who you say you are, or you're in a lot of trouble. And then it will ask them to populate their address. This other stuff, name, social security number, birth date, filing status, is coming in from what they've already set on the FAFSA. And then this is where they need to enter their address exactly like it is on their tax form, or it's not going to find that. And then it will go find it, and it will show here all the tax related information from their tax form that it is going to import into the FAFSA, and then it tells you the question number where it's going to go on the FAFSA. And you can click on transfer now, and it will transfer it into the FAFSA. And then you're back to the FAFSA screen, and then a lot of your fields have been populated. You'll see this little transferred from the IRS near the field, and it will show a figure on there. There's their adjusted gross that came in. And then here is that field. These parents were married, so they're going to have to manually segregate out their wages because that does not come in from the tax form. So you can look at their W-2s to see which parents had which earnings and enter those. And then it will ask if either parent is a dislocated worker, and those instructions will pop up on the screen, but that's generally someone who's been unemployed or is going to be laid off or is receiving unemployment benefits. And that's to let the school know a couple of things. One might be you had $70,000 in income the last year, and now you don't have that job, so it's kind of a trigger to the college. It might be someone to look at. The other thing for an adjustment, which you can adjust as a correction, the financial aid office could choose to use a more recent year's income than 2015. It also lets determines what formula the EFC will be calculated from. If your income is under $24,000 and you are a dislocated worker, or you file a short tax form, or you qualify for any of these need-based federal programs, you can go through what's called the auto zero EFC formula, which means you automatically get a zero EFC, no matter what the student's own income is or assets. If the parent's income is under $50,000 and they can file a short tax form, or they're a dislocated worker, or they qualify for any of these, that again would put it through a simplified EFC formula where the assets are ignored, any assets. So other than that, it's just going to go through the regular EFC formula that looks at both income and assets. So that's dislocated worker. And then these other programs, SSI, food stamps, free or reduced price lunch, TANF, which is public assistance, we would call MFIP in Minnesota, WIC, any of those, just click if anyone in the family is receiving benefits from those programs. You don't report the amounts you receive, just if you got benefits from those programs. And again, that doesn't have any, there's no negative impact on your benefits from those programs if you're applying for financial aid and receiving financial aid or vice versa. Then here's the other information that came in from their tax form, the amount of taxes paid, which is when you're doing your taxes and you look on that tiny little tax table to find what your liability is. That's what this is. It's taken, it's not what was withheld on your W-2 form. And then you're going to put in the number of exemptions on the tax form. And then it will start asking this section on additional financial information. Some of that could come from the tax form, but other stuff is not going to. And these are actually things that will be offsets against the parental income when the EFC is calculated. So if my parents filed a American Opportunity Tax Credit on their taxes of, in this case it was $5,900. I don't know why it would ever be that large. The maximum is $2,500, but that amount gets deducted off my parents' income when the EFC is calculated. Child support paid. That would be, let's say my stepfather is paying child support to his ex-wife and family. That is income going out of our household to another household, not available to our household. So that's a deduct off of parents' income. If parents had taxable earnings from work study, assistantships, or fellowships, pretty rare, but if they did, that would be a deduct. If this is this question no one ever knows. College grant or scholarship parents received that was reported to the IRS in their adjusted gross income the previous tax year. Technically, if you get grants and scholarships in excess of your educational costs, that portion above the cost is taxable income. I don't think anyone ever includes it on their tax form. So this will probably never be populated. Combat pay or special combat pay, and it will tell you what that is in the instructions, or cooperative education program earnings, which is even more rare. But just the key will be to look at those. It would be very rare that people would click any of these. They're in order of how common they are. So that tax credits first and then child support. Then you go to the untaxed income section, and that is looking at other forms of income to the family that are not in their adjusted gross income on the FAFSA. And they'll be added in to the parent's income as another form of income. If parents made payments to tax-deferred pension or retirement plans in 2015, that's the amount they put into those plans during that tax year. Like I work for the state, we have deferred compensation where we can put money away for retirement. It's not taxed now. It's taxed when you take it out. So because it's not in my adjusted gross now, it was still income I got, so it gets reported there. IRA deductions, that's going to come right from the tax form. Child support received, that would be any child support coming into our household to my parents from another party. Tax exempt interest income, that's income you had from interest that wasn't taxed. And again, it will tell you a line number to take it off from your tax form, or it'll come in from the IRS. Or untaxed portions of an IRA distribution. If you took money out of an IRA that wasn't taxed. It's that untaxed portion. And that can come from the IRS transfer as well. And then you have any pension they got that was not taxed. Any pension they withdrew, not taxed, goes there. Housing, food, and other living allowances paid to military, clergy, or others. That might be like Bethel University has some students where their parents might be ministers and get a free housing allowance from their church. That gets reported there. Veterans non-education benefits. That would be any of these benefits the parents might get that are not GI Bill. They're non-education veterans benefits. And then other untaxed income that the parents may receive. It's not public assistance, TANF, MFIP, food stamps, workers' comp. Val, help me out. What do you see in there?
Rarely.
Yeah, it's really not much you see in that field, but it's on the FAFSA regardless. And then it will ask them if their assets were over a certain amount, where they will go on then to fill out the asset questions. And if it's under a certain amount, it can skip the assets because it's so low it won't make a difference in the EFC. But if they do get to the asset questions, this is a snapshot again of what they have in assets as of the day they're filling out the FAFSA. So parents' cash, savings, and checking as of today. They want to pay all their bills first, then do it. Probably a good idea. Net worth of parents' investments or other real estate. That's something other than the home they live in. It's going to be maybe other property they have or a cabin, other real estate, or non-retirement investments. So you don't have to list the value of a retirement plan, things like that. It's going to be stocks, bonds, a 529 college savings plan that they have for a child would get reported here as a non-retirement investment. And then business or farm, and that's pretty rare too, but to be reported there, they would have to have ownership or partial ownership in a large business with 100 or more full-time employees. Most businesses are smaller than that, or an investment farm, and that's a farm you don't live on and operate. If you live in town and you have a farm and it's an investment farm, then it gets reported. Otherwise, that's a 0. Then you're finished with the parent section, and I won't really go into detail with the students. It's the exact same thing, pretty much. I'll show you a few differences, but you're pulling in the same thing for the student. A lot of students won't have file taxes, will have earned so little they didn't have to. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the filing threshold. I think it's around $6,300 for tax year 2015. So if they earned under that amount, they may not have to file. They might file to get a refund back, but they don't have to. So they're doing all that, and they can go do that IRS data transfer too. And they will need a FSA ID in order to do that. And there again is bringing in information. If they didn't file, it'll just ask them to put in their wages from their W-2 if they worked. And then it'll go to some other information from the tax form, then all these kind of categories here. And this, if you're working with a returning college student, they may actually have had earnings the previous tax year from a work-study job, and they can report those here, and that's a deduct against their income used to calculate the EFC for the coming school year. And then the untaxed income categories too that we saw for the parents. This is one question that you'll see for a dependent student that you don't see for the parents. And that's technically if a dependent student receive money or had someone other than a parent give them money or pay a bill, one of their bills, that goes here. They're supposed to report it there. Whether they really do or not, I don't know. But technically, if your grandma took out a 529 savings plan and gave you a distribution to pay your tuition, they're paying one of your bills, and that goes here. That's not always an item looked at in verification. And then you have the 3 asset questions again, same as the parents. Again, the one little notation here is that if this dependent student happens to own their own 529 savings plan for college, that still gets reported as a parental asset on the FAFSA. And a lot of people think it's better to put parents' assets in a child's name for tax purposes, but for financial aid, just the opposite effect. Any net worth the dependent student has, 20% of it goes into the EFC. Where with parents, they get a protection against a large portion of their assets, and then it's just like 5.6% of any amount over that protection goes into the EFC. So much better to have it in the parent's name, and that's why they get to, the dependent student's own 529 plan gets to go under the parent's assets. And then you come to the end, and there'll be, for a dependent student, a student signature spot where they will have to agree to these terms. The information's true. They're not going to default on a loan. Agree to those terms and then sign it. And they'll have 3 options for signing. One is signing electronically with the FSA ID. One is saying just submitting without signatures. And the third is printing out a signature page, physically signing it and mailing it in. If you had a paid preparer help the family, they would check yes, that, there, and put in some information. That's not a high school counselor. That's not you. So that's the student signature spot. And then we have the same thing for the parents. One parent has to sign. They pick which one. They also agree to those terms and pick their signature option, electronic or paper signature page. And it's made sometimes at this point that they're going to create their FSA ID if they haven't already done that to import their tax information. And then you can submit your FAFSA now, and it goes into the system. And once it's in, it's unavailable for a couple days. You can't get to it to make a correction, so you'll be with a student and they'll submit it and go, oh, I forgot to do this. You can have to wait a few days to make any correction. You'll see this information on the confirmation page. In Minnesota, you'll see another notation here that says, click here to start your state financial aid application. That terminology is a little misleading. It's actually a questionnaire. They get directed to our secure website to do a short questionnaire about their history of residency in Minnesota and how much college they've attended. So you're not missing out on applying for state financial aid if you miss that link. Schools use the FAFSA as the application. If the student does miss that link and they're a student that we want to fill out the questionnaire, we email them with a direct link to come back to it where they can get in without a password and all of that. So they shouldn't worry too much about that. It'll tell them a little bit of information about the colleges they selected on their, when they listed colleges in that section. It will tell them their EFC, what their Pell Grant amount should be, the kind of Stafford loan eligibility they may have. And so a lot of useful information on that page. And then they'll get, in a few days, email with a link to their output document, the student aid report. And they should look that over carefully and make any corrections they need to make. And students often don't look at it carefully, but there's certain errors you could make where it really has an impact on the EFC and the school may never catch it. If I say I have 7,000 in savings and I meant 700, school would never know. And boy, would my EFC be higher at 7,000 than it would at 700. So look it over carefully. If the school does select it for verification, probably get a verification worksheet that asks them to import data from their taxes if they haven't already, and probably some questions about household size and number in college and those things. So it's not uncommon to be selected for verification. And then after that FAFSA is processed, you could approach the financial aid office in certain cases to do what's called a professional judgment adjustment. And that means the most common example would be, like I said, parents had $70,000 in income last tax year. Both of them lost their jobs, and now their income this year is only unemployment. And so they can approach the financial aid office and they can adjust it to a more current year's income, which could lower the EFC. They'll probably want letters of layoff, want to know what they're getting in unemployment and things like that. But that's always something you can think about if there's a big change from year to year. Also, huge medical expenses in the previous tax year that weren't covered by insurance is another item. So they can check into that. And just a note here that for the coming FAFSA year after this 16-17 year, for 17-18, that whole FAFSA system is going to be very different. It's going to start using the prior year income. So not only will 2015 tax year income be used for the 16-17 FAFSA, for the 17-18 FAFSA as well. So that'll be confusing for a while for parents during the first couple years, but it'll be a good thing because you'll be doing away with all the problems of taxes not being finished on time and all of that. And then the FAFSA season will start in October of 2016 for the 17-18 year, 3 months earlier. And that will hopefully mean eventually students get more time to find out about their financial aid and make decisions on what college to attend. It'll take a while for schools to kind of adapt and move up their processing cycle and so forth, but that's coming down the pike for the next year. And I just have a handout for you somewhere about this that you can take with you, but it just kind of compares what it would have looked like under the current system to what it's going to be changing to for that year. Just quickly for the DREAM Act, these are undocumented students that can't do the FAFSA. They can apply for state financial aid, and we have these are students that had 3 years at a Minnesota high school, graduated or got their GED in Minnesota, and if they're male, they have to register with the Selective Service. So again, these are kids who are not citizens, permanent residents, refugees. They can apply using the DREAM Act application. And the old one we had was quite complicated, not ideal for them. But the new one we have started with for the 15-16 year is one we built. We essentially took the FAFSA on the web code and modified it for Minnesota. So that's why I don't go into it. It's just like the FAFSA, it has English and Spanish on the screen, instructions and questions. Kids aren't having problems with it. They can access that right from our website. And just like the FAFSA, now we have the 15-16 available and the 16-17, which they'll want for that coming year that starts this fall. If they need help with it, you probably know the FAFSA, so you can help them, but they can always call our office as well. And that's our webpage there for the DREAM Act. It's for the application, it's telling them the requirements of the DREAM Act. Also telling them it's a one-shot deal. It's not quite as sophisticated as the FAFSA with the ability to log in and out of it. You have to do it a one-shot deal, and it comes into our office, and then we do 100% verification on all the applicants. So we're getting their tax form copies. We're using copies of tax forms. We can't use IRS data retrieval because we're a state. We'll make any corrections when we do verification for them. So that's one difference from the FAFSA. And then we do all that in our office. We screen them, we award them, and then we just tell colleges who we awarded. They certify they're enrolled, and we send the money to the campus. So it's really done centrally in our office for this group of students, and there's about 650 applicants for the current school year. And there's my contact information. Any questions on material so far, the FAFSA, that you need answered that I didn't cover? Then I'm going to pause the recording for just a moment. And
okay, so good morning. My name is Pam Baker, and I am the College and Career Specialist at Champlain Park High School, which is one of 5 schools in the Anoka-Hennepin School District. I have been doing a FAFSA or a college goal event for I think 4 or 5 years. We also work collaboratively in our district. So when I say we have the 5 high schools, we sit down in the fall and identify which building is going to do the FAFSA goal or the FAFSA work night, each month, and how we're going to, allocate and change that or present that to parents. And so, I'm going to go through some of the things that are, provided to you on the coordinator's manual. I will give you some insight from just my own perspective of how things have worked. And then, I'll certainly have time for questions. My contact information is on the screen, and feel free to contact me if you have questions, as you're working through the process. Just so I know who the audience is, how many people have in the past had a college goal event? Okay, so most of you are new to the process, and so then we'll kind of go through it maybe a little bit more in detail, but not, I'll really be respectful of your time because I know you need to get back in the building. All right, so college goal, started as a college goal Sunday. It's a statewide volunteer program that provides free information and assistance to students and families who are applying for financial aid for post-secondary education. The funds that we use in order to do posters and some of those kinds of things, and to award our scholarships that I'll talk a little bit about, all come from the USA funds. I also have served on the the Minnesota College Goal Committee for, I think this will be my 3rd school year. And so, there are people who actually submit, an application for the funds, and then the funds are allocated and come back to Minnesota for us to be able to offer this to our families. All right, the targeted population. It's free assistance to all college-bound students. However, they're really trying to target the most underrepresented students. And so those would include our students from low-income families, first-generation students, students of color, or unaccompanied youth. And really, truly, again, this is a forum for people to come together who may have questions, who may have difficulty, who may be the first in their family to complete the FAFSA. In my events, and I have a couple pictures for you, you will see that oftentimes those are the parents who come. There's a lot of parents who can go ahead and do the whole process without your assistance, and they go ahead and do it. There's a lot of families that really need that extra help, or just even need that emotional support, because I think that FAFSA has really gotten a bad rap out there with families, and that it's not as complicated as what they sometimes believe it to be. All right, the goals are just that it's to help low-income families and first-generation students complete it, that it's to reduce or eliminate one major barrier to post-secondary education, which is the applying for financial aid. It provides another step towards college access and success. So it is an event where students and families can attend, and their goal would be to start and hopefully complete and submit their FAFSA. So there's all kinds of different events, and what I'm going to encourage you to do is really to think about your building, to think about your audience, and then to think about what's manageable for you. Okay, and as we sit at the committee meeting, sometimes we often ask ourselves, why wouldn't someone participate in a college goal event? Why would you say, I have my own financial aid event, I'm not going to do a college goal event? And I think the reason maybe people say they don't want to is because they believe it's going to be a whole lot more work, all right? Or there's going to be a whole lot more expectations. And I have not found that to be true at all. And so just some types of events. You could do have a computer room, give overall instructions, and then just have individuals ask for questions as they need it. You could do a quick question room where, you could have someone stationed where there's just their purpose is just to answer a quick question for those students and parents who are ready to come in and go out. Perhaps you want to do roundtable where volunteers, experts meet with 2 or 3 families to actually review the FAFSA. Maybe you're going to review the FAFSA with the worksheet and then direct families to the computer room if there's time. Direct folks to an area to complete the educational award. So we're going to talk about that educational award. And so sometimes, schools will have, the FAFSA completion in one part, and they may have their families transition to another section to do the online survey and to complete the educational awards. Some others might be a group presentation for the FAFSA. So you start out with a group presentation. Parents and students come to that, and then from there they go into an area where you have computers and they're able to work through the process. So you can pick and choose. You can say, you know what, I'm going to do a FAFSA presentation, and then we're going to have work time. Or you can say, I'm going to do we're just going to have work time. I think the important piece with how you decide to deliver the information and what you decide to present to parents or offer to parents is really clear communication. Last year, I had several parents who came in, even though in every single publication we put out and every time we marketed the event, we said, this is not a formal presentation. This is FAFSA work time. I still had parents that came in and said, well, I thought you were going to do a presentation on the FAFSA. And so it was like, I'm not sure where the communication broke down, but I think that that needs to be something that you really kind of are mindful of, that it needs to be very clearly specified as to what is going to happen at your event. The role of the site coordinator. For some of you, that may be you sitting in this room. Some of you may be lucky and you have a whole team of people that are going to work through it. But again, as I said earlier, I think that sometimes people are like, I don't want to do a Minnesota College Bowl event because it's more work for me. And really, it's not. So the first thing is just to decide on the type of event. Decide based on the population that you serve, based on the size and the facilities that you have, because I think those are things that are going to determine, can you serve 10 people at a time or 10 families? Can you serve 40 families? What does that actually look like? And then the site selection, exactly where it's going to be. Organize a site planning team, if you have the luxury of doing that. Otherwise, I meet with my colleagues in our district and we identify dates and we talk about what works, but we don't plan each individual event together. I don't go to other people in my building and say, okay, help me plan it. I kind of plan it. I figure it out based on my schedule and what we think works. And then I ask for assistance kind of with the event itself. But if you are in a situation where you can bring in other people for input, that may work. Promoting your event, and I'll give you a little bit more information as to how we do that, just so that you kind of have some idea. Make sure that you have equipment, tables, chairs. If it's not going to be in a computer lab, you're going to want to recruit volunteers, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Set up the presentation if you're going to offer a presentation. Organize the educational award drawing, develop handouts, coordinate tasks for your volunteers, forward the forms and surveys to the state coordinators, and be sure that you thank your volunteers. This is small, but this is actually in the coordinator's manual that I'll show you in just a minute. But I wanted to put this on here because really, if you go to the Minnesota College Goal site, and I will direct you to that, there is so much information. It is a fabulous website. It helps you go through the College Goal event step by step. And there's one prior to your event, there's one the day of your event, and there's one after the event. And so really, truly, if you're someone like me that likes lists and you want people to check it off and make sure that you've got things done, this is very, very helpful. But the web page that I'll direct you to and show you in just a couple minutes not only has information about this event, but has a lot of really, really good information about financial aid, about the FAFSA, all of those things that you and your families may need or want. All right, so maybe you do have the luxury of a site planning team. You can, contact financial aid representatives, your college access programs. Maybe you work really closely with your high school guidance counselors. Maybe you are a high school guidance counselor, and so you're going to bring it back to your building and work with a team of 3 or 4. In our high schools in Anoka Hennepin, we each have the luxury of having a career and college specialist in our career centers, and we are full-time, and then we have a counseling staff as well. And so, we typically are someone who would plan this event and then go to our counselors, but if you are a counselor and you work with 4 or 5 individuals, they can certainly help and give input into that process. Maybe you have a group of teachers that are involved. Maybe you want to take it out to your community, a community representative, a student, a parent. You're going to look at public relations, adult education, high school associate representatives, and youth servicing agencies. I would tell you that this would be like, to me, if someone told me, okay, you know what, Pam, you need to make a contact here and here and here and here and here, I would be overwhelmed. And I would be going, are you kidding me? Like, I need to do all of this? And it's kind of like the movie, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I think the first time through, you just really worry about, okay, we're going to have this event, and are people going to come? And I think we really work hard in our district of trying to reassure ourselves that it's really not the number of participants that you have, but rather the fact that if you had 5 families that came, and it was a manageable amount of work for you, and those 5 families got what they wanted, then your event was successful. And nobody is counting whether you have 5 families or 20 families. Nobody is comparing you to anyone else. And so for me, if I had been told I had to do all of this and make all of these contacts, I might have said, no, thanks, I can't do that. I don't have time to put that extra piece on my plate. So this is Champlain Park High School, all right? We are a school of about, we have about 650 students in our senior class. We have about 33% free and reduced lunch, a little bit less than that are students of color. And so while we may not be as diverse as some of schools, we certainly have students that fall into those underrepresented categories. So at Champlain Park High School, as I said earlier, we as a district sat down and we have 5 high schools, so we have 5 events scheduled in, early from February to March. All right, and we've already identified the date. We happen to have a beautiful library media center where we have the ability to have 50 to 60 computers. And so we can certainly accommodate, many, many families. I think the worst but the best would be, oh my gosh, we don't have a computer for you. That would be like, an amazing. And we typically, out of our, 600 students, maybe each year at this event, and it's grown every year that we've done it, I think we maybe service 30 to 40 families. I mean, that's who come to the event. And in my position, then I help many, many families individually do and complete their FAFSA. So new this year, because I told you of the confusion that was last year and parents asked for it. They said, I thought you're going to have a presentation. So this year, I am going to have a presentation. So I've asked a director of financial aid. He's going to come out and he's going to present from 6 to 6:35 to 6:40. All right, and we have another space for that. So parents that want to come to the presentation can come, and he's going to talk about the different parts of the FAFSA, much like Ginny did, but not quite as in depth, but going to kind of talk through, answer questions. At the same time, we will have our our media center open for parents who don't have questions, that don't want to listen to the presentation, just come in, sit down, and actually start working. Okay, so we're going to have both kind of going on, and next year I'll report back to say it worked or it didn't work. And I think, again, even if I only have 5 parents who come and say we really want that presentation, great. I may have 50 parents who come to the presentation but really don't believe they're ready to start the FAFSA, and that's okay too. So I'm going to do that. So at our school, families will come in, they're welcomed and checked in by a volunteer. I typically tend to have 2 to 3 volunteers in addition to financial aid officers. And those people are doing the organization and the running. I come in and get things ready to go, but there are people who may not have an expertise or a knowledge of the FAFSA. I have parent volunteers. I have some of our school counselors who really are not familiar with the FAFSA and don't know very much. They come and they just welcome parents. They have them sign in. They give them kind of a checklist of what the expectations are for the night. You're going to want to log into the FAFSA. You're going to need to complete the survey. And then for sure, you're going to want to, turn in that educational award so that your name is put into a drawing for $500. And it's a $500 award that is given because you participated. So it's a random, selection process, and all it is just some information that they fill out in order for us to contact them. And so, as I said, they're non-financial aid officers, parents, school counselors, others. They're provided handouts. Some of the handouts that Ginny provided you today are excellent to have there. I saw someone with the number 1, 2, 3, 4. Those would be excellent brochures to hand out. If you have not ordered those, I would suggest that you at least get number 1, which is the basic of financial aid, although I did see that a couple of the other ones were out of stock and not available, but you can always download the PDF and make a few copies. So those kinds of things would be available at that check-in table. At my school, I provide snacks, but I know that some of my colleagues do not. And when I say snacks, I have little bottles of water, I get a big thing of chips, and I get some cookies from Costco. At my school, I have the ability that someone will reimburse me for that. If that works in your school, great. If it doesn't, it's okay too. It doesn't have to be. It's whatever you would like it to be. And then I look and typically I have 3 or 4 financial aid officers or others who are very familiar with the FAFSA. Okay, and as far as, we'll talk a little bit about getting those volunteers. But so I usually try to have 4 or 5 people who really know about the FAFSA, and that can be me. I'm counted in one of those, and then it's other, but I really like to have some of the financial aid directors, because there are so many questions that even though I've done the FAFSA for many, many years and work with many, many families, there's always that night questions that I'm like, okay, come on over here, because I don't know the answers. And that's why those people are just like so valuable to your event and make you feel a lot less stressed about it, because you as the coordinator do not need to be the expert on the FAFSA. You do not. You just need to organize the event, and you'll have people there who will be amazing. They're just amazing, and they're very knowledgeable in their field. So before the event, again, I refer to the coordinator's manual. I decide on the date, decide on the type of event. I'm going to contact the financial aid officers and contact other volunteers. I'm going to, at our school, we promote. So we created a flyer that we use district-wide. And so at every time we're in front of parents and students, we hand out that flyer. That's available in our career centers. We have e-news that goes out that's already being promoted, and those start in February, and we promote the whole district. So we can say, whichever one works best for your schedule, please plan to attend, all right? Our principals make phone links to parents, so as we get a little bit closer, they'll start telling our parents to please remember that this is, something that's upcoming and they should plan on it. It's on our district-wide school calendars. We also use Naviance, and so we'll be sending emails out to students just as a reminder, hey, these events are coming up. And then we'll start putting it out to students in their advisories and their senior homerooms and all of those kinds of things. So the more publication you can do, the more likely you're going to have students. If you have if you have a College Possible program, if you have an AVID program, if you have an Upward Bound program in your school, those are all programs that service those targeted populations, and that they can work directly with you and really promote it within their areas as well. Working with building technology, I think that's a really important piece. Just because you want to make sure that, if parents want to be able to print their final sheet, that they can do that. The first year I went in and we had them all logged in as guests. So parents could just come in, sit down, there was no login. Well, in our building, when you log into our computer as a guest and it's all set up, oops, there was no printing. I was like, oh, great. So I've learned a few things like that, but just really to check with your technology people. This year we've gotten rid of some of our actual computers and we have Chromebooks. Well, that's great, but the Chromebooks don't always print, and so you have to kind of go an extra step to get that to happen. So really be talking to your technology people about what they can do to help you and how they can make it as easy for your parents. And maybe it's, you put an icon on the desktop that says FAFSA, and so they just click on the icon. Maybe it's an icon that just says, it's a folder that says the survey, and you can put that on there. So some things that you can maybe do ahead of time that might help your parents. So here are just some pictures, because I think they say, a million words really about the event and how it works and looks at Champlain Park High School. This was an interesting thing for me. In the fact that, we had a family that was working on their FAFSA, and then, their younger children and their siblings came. And so we talked about that, so maybe you have some color sheets, maybe, some of those kinds of things that, that obviously the baby in the stroller, but those other 3 children, kind of sat at one of our library tables. And so, color sheets and some of those kinds of things might be nice if you think that you have populations that may be bringing their whole family that evening. Again, not required, but just something a little bit extra you can add. Now, do we have families who come in who may not need any help at all and are not part of that underrepresented population? Absolutely. We have parents who come in that just want to sit down and make sure that if they have questions, somebody can answer them, that they just feel like it's a lot more secure, like I can get through this process. And so certainly we have all of those kinds of families that are represented. Okay, so volunteer task. So volunteers. So some of you may have already, if you've registered your college goal event, you may have gotten a notice that said so-and-so volunteered to be at your event, okay? And if you have, that's great. That is put out there to the directors of financial aid, and so some of them may have, they may come in and sign up for your event, okay? If you haven't had someone say, hey, I want to come to your school, don't panic, okay? Because there's many, many, many people. What I do is I usually get 1 or 2 that say they'll come to our event because I've had it for 4 or 5 years. Okay, so they're kind of familiar with it. They know how things work. It's pretty easy, so they come, all right? But then it's on my list for the next couple of days, and my event isn't scheduled until March 22nd, so I'm the last one in our district. But I already have on my calendar that I'm going to start contacting, and I think my colleagues probably are a step ahead of me, but I'm going to start contacting those financial aid officers for the schools that are within our area, all right? And I also want to make sure that you don't rule out any particular school. So don't rule out our community and technical colleges, don't rule out our private career schools, or, four-year universities. And so any of those. And when I've made calls, people are just very, very willing to help. And they're like, okay, let me see, how many people do you want, do you need? And so sometimes one school will send 2 people. Sometimes they'll say, you know what, we're booked, but, put us on for next year. And so really making those calls is not, people are so nice and they're really willing to help you. And so I think that, that piece shouldn't be intimidating and really can be an easy process for you or for someone else. Make sure that, before the event, assist with promotion. I don't think my volunteers do that, but they might. You may want to try to get, a scholarship just for your building, or maybe some kind of a prize to entice families and students to come. I've never done that, but that's another possibility. During the event, I really feel like I want my volunteers to be busy, and that's like something that makes me a little nervous. Like, okay, I have like 3 financial aid directors, and what if I only have 10 families, and and so I really kind of think through the process about what can their responsibilities be. But again, remember that those financial aid officers are willing to help those few families if that's what happens. But during the event, the volunteers can be your parents or whatever. They can help with setup and cleanup. They can greet and sign in participants. They can help with childcare if you are in a situation where you believe that's going to happen. Certainly they're there for FAFSA assistance. They can help get the parents to, okay, I've completed my FAFSA, now I need to go to the survey, and let's complete that educational award so that I can get my name in for $500. They can answer participants' questions, answer non-financial aid questions, traffic control and signs, and uninvited guests. And I kind of laugh at that because I never had an uninvited guest, but that's in the manual just in case you might. How would you, handle that, or, suggest people go to another room or whatever. So this is kind of a fun thing that we've started in our district. So one of my colleagues, he said, oh, hey, look what I'm doing for my volunteers tonight. And I'm like, seriously? Like, you did this? Well, I think really honestly, he had his, 17-year-old office workers, go on to Pinterest and find something really cute, So I'm like, oh, God, now you're making me feel bad. So then I went on to Pinterest. And I found a couple of things that, and there are millions of things out there. And so this one says, thank you for officially being the best. We appreciate your efforts. And this one says, you are a star. Thank you for your willingness to help. Okay. And then I had that there for my volunteers, both the financial aid administrators or directors, as well as my parent volunteers. Okay. One of our other colleagues does caribou cards. But please know you don't have to do anything. It can be just a thank you, all right? If this to you is stress, then don't do it. It was for me, but I didn't want to be outdone by one of my colleagues, so I did it. I mean, I'm not a Pinterest person. I'm like, seriously, no, I need to find something cute. But you don't have to, okay? That was just put in there just because it's kind of fun. And they were like, oh, wow, this is really cool. But if it stresses you, take it off your plate. Don't do it. All right, so that evening, we have people come in, they sign in, and that sheet is in your coordinator's handbook. Then each of your volunteers, whether they're your financial aid directors, whether they are your counselors, or whoever, parents, all need to sign a volunteer agreement form. And that just says that, that this is, that they may be viewing personal financial information, that the information is not going to be used or goes anywhere but that event. And so they need to sign that, and then that's a form that you'll need to submit back in to the College Goal Committee. Promoting your event, again, you know what works best in your school. And I think the more information that you can provide and get out there, and the earlier you can do that in many, many different formats, will get your parents and students there. Again, this is expanding your reach. I can tell you that, there are a lot of things up here that I don't do, but I feel like we still have a very successful event. And so if some of these, work for you and you have those services that are available, then by all means, take advantage of them. Again, partnerships, maybe providing additional family services. And I think the population that you serve, and so whether that would be something that's beneficial, a tax preparation assistance or whatever you find might be beneficial within your organization. So then what has to happen is that we're asking every parent or student, one per family that comes to the event, to do the College Goal Survey. And it's an evaluation. It's online. Ginny, I could not find the link for it today and even yesterday when I was going through stuff, but there'll be a link that you can just have your participants go to. It's a really short, maybe 10-question survey that they just, click the boxes. And what that does is it helps provide data for the Minnesota College Goal Committee to, provide to USA funds to continue to get funding for this event. And so, we can't force people to do it, but if you kind of hold that, educational award out there, like, hey, once you do this survey, you can put your name in for a $500 award, people are like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And it's really a very short thing that they need to do. And so we're asking that you do that. And there will be a link available so that you can have them just click on that link, or like I said earlier, have your technology people put it onto your computer so it's just a click on that particular icon. Paper surveys, I don't think we've used those. The participant survey, the volunteer survey, any volunteer person that volunteers will get, a request to do a survey as well, so that we can kind of, as a committee, keep track of, what things work, what things might not work, who comes, who doesn't come. And then the educational award. So once the students have completed the student survey, they may then complete the educational award entry form. We cannot require families or students to complete the award entry form, nor can we require them to complete the survey. So it can't be you must do this, but I haven't found anyone to be, opposed to it. They were absolutely fine. The educational award is $500. This award can be used at any college or university. Once enrollment is verified, the award will be paid directly to the college. I did work on that scholarship piece, and so then we follow up in the fall and we contact students, and then we work to make sure that the money is going and being allocated to the proper schools. So here's a list, and it maybe is a little bit small, but you can see that there's students from all over the state that have received the award. There's a few places like Hennepin Technical College got 4, Washington Technology Magnet got 2, and that may have been strictly because of the number of events that they offered. A lot of our college sites will offer one every week, and so if you go on to where they register, you can see that they have 6 or 7, and you just know that that's just an ongoing part of their financial aid office, and so that's why they may have gotten a couple of others. But they're really from all over. And when I look at, in our district, we have Andover and Anoka Ramsey Community College, and then Champlin Park. And this is interesting because the person that got it from Champlin Park really wasn't a Champlin Park student, but came to the FAFSA workshop there, and so her site was Champlin Park, and that's kind of how these are sorted. But you can see that's a lot of $500 awards. So there's money that we get from USA funds that goes back to our students, and that can really be an awesome initiative to encourage and have parents and students come. So some reminders. Making sure that you have your volunteers sign the volunteer agreement form, requiring all volunteers to wear a name tag. On the College Goal site, they have name tag badges that they have the format for you right there, so you can use those. I know our financial aid officers always come with their name badges, and so I have them wear that. Often offer refreshments. And any other information. Make sure that you're posting visible directional signs. Have a weather contingency plan. I don't know if you say if it's canceled on Tuesday, we'll have it the next Thursday, but that gets a little bit tricky because of people that you have volunteering to help. So that might be something just to think about. You're going to communicate early and often. All of the educational awards, which actually are done on paper, they're going to go to the Minnesota College Goal P.O. Box. And again, all of this information is on the website that I'll show you in just a second. Don't allow any solicitation. Don't ask for social security numbers. Don't require participants to sign up. Don't forget to say thank you, and don't turn away help. So let's say you have your volunteers and everything set, and somebody calls and says, hey, can I volunteer at your site? I always say sure. And even if that means that I take a step in the background and I don't have to be a crazy person running around that night, that's all the better. And so really, truly, don't turn away help. Some real tips: make connections, develop a planning team, volunteer, inform leadership. Make sure that your principals know. If nothing else, it's really good PR for you, and they get pretty excited about it. The first year we did it, my principal stepped in, and it was not a whole lot. I did it pretty early in the season. There were not a lot of people there, and so my principal came back to me and said, hey, Pam, would you do this again a little bit later in the FAFSA processing season? And I was like, sure. So then we kind of worked at doing something during conference time. And so, make sure that they know, because it really is a good thing for them to see you involved in. Leverage in-kind resources, empower, provide small refreshments, offer informational material, whatever personal touch you have, whatever creativity you want to add to it. And then again, raising visibility. And I know we do have some posters that are here for you to put out there, and the sooner you can get those out, the better. Start the planning process early, again, working with your technology people just to make sure that everything is a go for that evening. And then there's the site coordinators resources, and I'm going to see if we can get you out to that page.
I'm not sure.
Will it go?
I think we have to.
And that's okay. We don't. Maybe we should, no? Okay, so the website is there, and if it doesn't go directly out there from this PowerPoint, but again, please check out the coordinator, the Minnesota College Goal Coordinators site, because it has so much good information for you and really can help you walk right through it. So some of the things you'll find are the coordinator's manual, the planning tools and templates. There's financial aid presentations that you can use, the volunteer agreement form, the educational award, link to the online survey, which will be there. It's not this morning, but it will be there. FAFSA completion tips, resources, and handouts for your participants all are there for you to access. And then there's contact information. The Minnesota College Goal has an email. Also, we have 2 new co-chairs on our committee, and Marcio is here, and he's one of the co-chairs of the College Goal Committee. So I didn't ask him, but his name is up there. And he may refer to someone else because he's brand new, but he will make sure that you get the information. And then I put Beth Barsness's contact information as well, because Beth has been part of the committee for forever, and she's very, very knowledgeable about College Goal events, as well as contacting Ginny on any questions about the FAFSA or anything else that you have that may be specific to that. And again, don't hesitate to call me, and my name was on the very front slide, because I can answer some logistic kinds of things. So, questions?
Is the link up here, the volunteer survey link, those were all broken? Do you know if they've activated those yet?
So I was just going to address that. So hi, I'm Marcio Thompson. I'm one of the co-chairs for Minnesota College Goal. Thank you all for coming out. Just a few things about the survey links. You mentioned that earlier we were funded by USA Funds. Now the funder is now moving to another organization. So USA Funds is no longer collecting that information. So now we're making a Google form behind the scenes for our surveys, and we'll put those links up as soon as possible. Okay. And let's see, what was the other thing? So if you have volunteers who are signing up, so if you're recruiting volunteers, please, as much as you can, try to drive those volunteers to the Minnesota College Goal website so that they can sign up as volunteers on the site, so we can keep track of that information. And then, if you're promoting your event via social media, also link to our Minnesota College Goal Facebook page, because we'll be promoting all the events via social media as well. So I think we have our Facebook page and Twitter. So make sure if you're doing it via social media to connect with us, because we're getting it out to people as well. So did anyone have any other questions regarding the survey?
What about the student survey?
The student survey, we're working on the student survey and volunteer survey right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just found out that people no longer want that information, but we want that information, so we're creating it.
One thing I would say too is don't be intimidated by the College Goal website site coordinator page. I see like a bazillion documents on there, and those are just for you to pick and choose from. It's not like you have to use all of those for every event.
And that's why I think the page is really well done and has a lot of information, because you can say, hey, I need this. Oh, it's there. And you can just grab it and then run with it. So it works very well.
Can you share which handouts you use at Children's Park?
I can. We have the basics for financial aid, so we do 1, 2, 3, 4. We do the questions that are here, just about, as far as completing the FAFSA, we do that. Eric, what else do we use?
We always hand out our like scholarship list that we've
Oh.
been promoted, like that we have on our Career Center website. We hand out,
So that would be something that's not directly related to the FAFSA, but certainly things that those students and parents should be in tune to.
we also do like just like a Naviance 101 sheet just for people looking for more resources and just to kind of push direct parents back to Naviance. And we do like that Wells Fargo planning for college checklist book that we have. I think that's probably the main things that we focus on.
And you certainly may want to do, I know that Ginny created a form that was kind of like the FAFSA, like what next? And I think that it's kind of like, okay, once you've done the FAFSA, then what can you expect? And I think that's another really good form to have available too. And I think that's on the coordinator's webpage, just that whole FAFSA. Okay, I've done it, now what happens? What do I need to do next? And so I think that's a really good piece of information to have for parents and students as well.
And just real quickly about the publications, we're currently out of the FAFSA basic ones. So if your event is coming up fairly quickly, like in the next 2 weeks, we may not have those back in. But just go ahead and order them on our on the OHE website, so also our education website, and we'll get them on back order and ship them out to you. But currently we're out of those.
So you can order them even though it says on back order, you can go ahead and submit an
You
order.
can't put a total.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
checking every day. You
Okay,
can't even.
Yeah.
So I know that we're going to be ordering some more. I just don't know how quickly they're going to be available. So I would say check back maybe early or late next week to see if we have some out there. But I know that we're currently out of that, and we're also out of the FAFSA one. So there's a Finance League Basics, and there's a FAFSA one that we're out of currently. But if you need copies of the choosing a college publication, we do have a ton of those. No.
Other questions? And just, on behalf of the committee and on behalf of the students that you serve, thank you for, being willing to come on and be a college goal